Every summer, it seems like we talk about hundreds of thousands of acres burning in the state of Arizona. What can and should be done about it? We have an expert. Welcome to the Mike Broomhead Show.
Well, I got a message. I got a song. Can I get a witness? Tell me what's going on. I show the people I've been away.
The expert is Travis Grantham. He's a representative in the state legislature, a pilot with the Air National Guard, and owns a company that helps fight those forest fires. He joins us in a few moments, but we start every show off with something we call The Sweep. Now, The Sweep is sponsored by my good friends at Zero Res Carpet and Tile Cleaning. We can't start off any show, it seems like, for the last almost 10 years, I guess, that we don't talk about Donald Trump and Donald Trump Jr. Now, what the new information is this. Donald Trump Jr., Paul Manafort, and Jared Kushner took a meeting with a Russian lawyer. There was an email exchange between Donald Trump Jr. and a music producer that said, the producer said they've got some information on Hillary Clinton, set up the meeting, and they went. Now, according to the lawyer herself, when she was talking with NBC, she said, first of all, Jared Kushner left the meeting almost immediately. Paul Manafort was so bored, he looked at his phone the entire time, and the meeting lasted maybe 15 or 20 minutes. What's going on after this now is these are the accusations of collusion. If you want to know what the story is, we're going to find out in the coming weeks. The president traveling in Europe was asked about it this week. This is what President Trump had to say about the meeting his son had.
As far as my son is concerned, my son is a wonderful young man. He took a meeting with a Russian lawyer, not a government lawyer, but a Russian lawyer. It was a short meeting. It was a meeting that went very, very quickly, very fast. Two other people in the room, I guess one of them left almost immediately, and the other one was not really focused on the meeting. I do think this. I think from a practical standpoint, most people would have taken that meeting. It's called opposition research or even research into your opponent. I've had many people, I have only been in politics for 2 years, but I've had many people call up, oh, gee, we have information on this factor or this person or, frankly, Hillary. That's very standard in politics. Politics is not the nicest business in the world, but it's very standard where they have information and you take the information. But nothing happened from the meeting. Zero happened from the meeting. And honestly, I think the press made a very big deal over something that really a lot of people would do.
Anxious to find out how this ends and what happens throughout all this, but the president pretty confident that it's much ado about nothing. They still have no evidence of collusion with the Russians. Let's just get on with the business of America. Let's tie a bow around some other things that are happening. James Comey, former FBI director, it's now been revealed that 4 out of the 7 memos that he released and leaked to the media, well, 4 of the 7 contain classified information. We're going to see what the future holds for James Comey. Will there be punishments for that if he did release classified information? He knows that's against the law, but to what degree will he be punished for all of that? Kind of ironic after the long list of things he said about Hillary and what she should have known or did know about the emails that she released. Earlier this week, I had Senators Jeff Flake and Ted Cruz both on my radio show. They were talking about the health care bill and what's called the Cruz Amendment. Ted Cruz put up an amendment saying that insurance companies inside the exchanges have got a level they must meet. And what I mean by that is they have to offer certain things in coverage to qualify with Obamacare. But if they have one plan that does meet that standard, they can offer a multitude of plans under that have less coverage for a lot less money to drive down the cost of premiums. He said that's the goal. Senator Flake says he's on board with that amendment. And on Thursday, the Senate met to talk about the new Republican bill and whether or not we can get a yes vote. They've delayed their recess in August, 2 weeks into August instead of August 1st. One, the good news for veterans. The Secretary of Veterans Affairs, David Shulkin, he has fired or suspended or demoted nearly 700 VA employees. It's about time that they started making changes in the Veterans Administration. Now let's talk about the FBI and the possible new director. His name is Christopher Wray. He was before a Senate hearing for his confirmation, and he said he was never asked, nor did he ever offer, to give a pledge of allegiance or a pledge of loyalty. Let's talk local before we get out of the sweep. The Phoenix Police Department may be changing their policy on immigration and on immigration enforcement. They may change this policy to say they won't ask immigration status of people that are victims or witnesses to crimes. The funny thing is they're not doing it now. And this is much ado about nothing. This is changing something and breaking something or fixing something that's not broken. And it's really not necessary. And finally, the downtown Sheraton, the largest hotel in the state of Arizona, 1,000 rooms, may be sold to a private company at what could be a $100 million loss to the Arizona taxpayers, or the city of Phoenix taxpayers. Way to go, City Council. We love it. Before we get out of this segment, we get you to Travis Grantham. I want to talk to you about the good people at Zero Res. Here's what's going on with Zero Res. This is National Carpet Cleaning Month. It's about knowing that cleaning your carpets extends the life. Cleaning them with Zero Res is really the best way to go. Their product is called Empowered Water. No soaps and no chemicals. It cleans as effectively as soaps and chemicals without the harsh effects. No residue means your carpets dry faster. They stay cleaner longer. They had a great special going on in the month of July, and this company has over 25,000 positive reviews online. Great company, great product. Next time you need your carpets cleaned, call the good people at Zero Res. We'll be back with Travis Grantham. Don't go away. Once again, it's fire season in Arizona. Wildfires burning around the state, 35,000 acres in one, thousands of acres in others. So I brought in someone that I know from our state legislature that's kind of an expert in this field. Travis Grantham, representative in the state legislature.
That's it.
You're also in the Air National Guard. You're a pilot here in Arizona. How long have you been in the Guard?
18 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I started out enlisted. I was actually a jet mechanic at the 161st Air Refueling Wing here in Phoenix. And after I did that for a few years and graduated from Arizona State, I was able to get hired to become a pilot and an officer there, and I've been doing that for about 15 years. So I'm a major. I hold the rank of major. I'm an aircraft commander and instructor on the KC-135.
So what kind of assignments have you been on? Have you been on, how many deployments have you been on?
So I've deployed my whole career. We go all over the world from this Guard unit. You know, we have about 11 airplanes and 1,000-ish people here and a very large presence. And of course, the airplane we fly, we're needed everywhere. We give gas to other airplanes in the air, fighters, bombers, transports. So I've been to Afghanistan, I've been to Iraq, I've been in Yemen, I've been in Syria, I've been in all those great places. And then, you know, we do a lot of work across the Pacific because of our location geographically here in the western U.S. We go to Japan, Hawaii, into that region quite a bit. And of course, I've been positioned and stationed in Europe for various exercises for both NATO and the United States Air Force in support of anything they need.
So then you have the unique set of skills as a pilot, and then you have a company that, this is what I wanted to ask you about, is the fires in Arizona, where you have planes that are equipped to douse those fires with that fire. Is it a fire retardant that we see that's dropped?
It is. It's the red stuff is called fire retardant, or you can drop water. I was lucky. I was born into a business where my dad was actually a crop duster and a firefighting pilot in old World War II era airplanes. He actually started the business here in the late 60s with a couple of his buddies out in Buckeye. The business changed a lot. It adapted. My dad, long since retired. I purchased the business. My brother and I are actually partners in the business. We've grown the business. We still maintain a presence in the firefighting field. In the aerial firefighting field, it's called, and the airplanes are called air tankers.
Yep.
We have 2 large aircraft, C-130s, that are equipped with a system to do that type of work, and we've done it all over the world. Our company is called International Air Response. We have 5 C-130s, a very large presence out at Phoenix Mesa Gateway Airport, and 2 of our airplanes have done that. We are not currently doing it in the United States for a lot of reasons. Our system in the United States isn't performing as well as it used to, in my opinion. But it's something we love, we're passionate about, and we hope to continue to be able to do.
So you're a native to Arizona?
I am, born and raised.
So then let me ask you about the fires. I've been here for 22 years, and it's amazing to me to watch the fires that have burned here. I was up in the White Mountains right after the Rodeo Chetaskai fire, and watched. You could just see how everything was just kind of scorched earth up there. And that's when it started to. That's when I started following a little bit more that the rules through the EPA are so strict that we can't thin the forest, we can't cut the underbrush to get the fuel off the ground, we can't cut in fire trails. Is there any way that you see getting new rules with this president in place where the states have more control over their own land?
I think so, and I'll tell you, I'm going to talk as the business guy and then the politician, and I'd rather be the business guy, but I love serving in this capacity as well. You know, from a business perspective, we should be harvesting, we should be getting timber out of the forest, we should be fighting fires, and we should be paying people to do that or have our own assets in the state. We just don't really focus. Now, part of the problem, I'm going to shift to the politics of it, is environmental policy. You can't go in the forest without a permit. You can't drive your vehicle. You can't step on something because you might hurt a squirrel or break a twig or something that is deemed endangered. It's really, the movement has been hijacked to the point where we have overprotected our forests and our resources so badly that now when they do ignite or when they actually catch on fire, they burn so fast and so hot that you can't even get in there and actively manage the fire. So it's almost like a paradigm shift where years ago we protected our resources in this country. Now it's more of an environmental thing like, well, fire's natural, we're going to let it do what it does. It's not natural if you overprotect and you don't allow it to thinly move through over time, which is what we have not done. You know, for the last 60 years in our country, we fought fire. I blame that policy. I blame the fact that, you know, over half of Arizona is owned by the federal government. I feel like there should be a movement, especially with the current administration that's in place, to turn more and more of that land over to the state. Quite honestly, the state could take better control from the legislature. We could do things that actually make the land produce better. And you know, who's going to make better choices about our own land in Arizona, with the land we love? Arizonans or somebody in a glass house in Washington, D.C.?
You're making my case for me, and you're a perfect example of it. There are a couple of, I've been around a lot around the country, and Texas and Arizona are two places that if you're a native to those two states, it's a sense of pride for them. And there's no prouder people than the people that are from the state of Arizona.
Right.
And if there's one group of people that want to maintain the herds of game animals and the forest, it's going to be the people that grew up here and want to pass it on to their grandchildren. And, you know, and it doesn't make any sense, like you said, for D.C. to be making rules when there are people like yourself in the legislature, been here your whole life, know this industry. They should be coming to you for advice, and instead you're beholden to their rules.
We should. We have great legislators who feel the same way. We have a governor who's supportive of that type of activity. I mean, this is one of the first years we have inmates working on the fire lines out of the prisons in Arizona fighting fire. You'd be very surprised, and we learned this when we offer aircraft to fight fires. The U.S. Department of Interior often won't let the state fight fires on federal lands because it's not their way. So many times the state of Arizona has to stand back because there may be a boundary line and let the forest burn. And we can't protect that resource because the federal government says that's our land and we're going to do it our way.
All right, I need to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about solutions because you're somebody that's fought these fires. You know this industry as a business person and a legislator. So when we come back, we'll talk solutions. Travis Grantham, he is a major in the Air Guard. He is also a legislator here in the state of Arizona. We'll be back to talk more about the forest fires and how to protect our forests. Hi, I'm with State Representative Travis Grantham. We're talking about forest fires because the industry that you're in is you fight fires with the air tankers. So I want to talk to you about the management of that. So here's the example I've used. Tell me if there's a better one. When the Rodeo Chediskai fire happened and when those other fires in the White Mountains, you can almost look on a map and see how the fire dances around the Apache land because they're not beholden to the same rules. When you go up to the Apache land, they have fire trails, they clear the underbrush, and as morbid as this sounds, the Yarnell Hill fire that took 19 firefighters' lives, they were literally walking on the fuel, and when they were overcome by that flame, there was no way to get away from the fuel. They were walking on it. Am I right?
You are. And I blame environmental policy. I actually blame groups like the Sierra Club. I blame all these people who focus all of their time on protecting those resources to the point where they overprotect them so much that we destroy them. And the reservations are a perfect example of that. Here we have the tribes who can go in and thin, like you stated, and look what the fire does. It stops at their boundary. And it's able to, you can fight it there. The other thing that we have witnessed in our industry firsthand is, you know, they used to have 60+ large air tankers in the United States of America on contract all the time. Now you're down to about 30. So you're 50% of the fleet, and they blame everything from budget cuts to it's not our method anymore to fight the fire right off the bat. So you don't have the ability to go out into these remote areas and build fire line and stop the fire in its tracks. The other thing we see is they used to start fighting fire at 6 a.m., 5 a.m., right? The temperature's cool, the humidity levels are higher. Now, you know, they have to have a planning meeting, and then they have to get the news crews in position, and they have to have a, you know, top-level staff meeting, and they are honestly dispatching aircraft to these fires at noon. And then the weather's getting bad, and thunderstorms are building, and the winds are up, and it's just not effective. You know, the air's drier, and then they're done by 4 or 5, and they all have to go home, and it's like you got half a day out of that. Very frustrating.
How low, and it's just a question, so I'm curious, how low or how above the fire line are you at the tops of the trees when you're dropping that retardant? And does it affect the flight of the plane with that heat?
It does, and how low or how high you are depends on what type of terrain you're over and what they're trying to achieve. If they're trying to lay a very thick fire line, which is ultimately what the airplanes do, the airplanes don't put out flames. The airplanes put a big, thick line of retardant down, and usually when the fire reaches it, it stops burning. And the retardant is laced with fertilizers and things that are good for the forest, by the way. But you know, you're anywhere from 50 feet above the tree line to 200 feet above the tree line. Obviously, the lower you are, the more effective it is because it can be laid in. The pilots have to be very careful, though, because as you can imagine, there's mountains, there's terrain, there's things in front of them, there's power lines, and their number one priority is safety.
So when it comes to management and fighting the fires, what is best? What's best practice? Before we talk about that part of it, if we were able to thin the forest, what would the timber industry like? Is there any studies in the legislature what the timber industry could generate as far as money in these northern parts of Arizona and the dollars it could generate?
Well, yes, and you can kind of figure that out by looking at what used to exist in the state of Arizona before we had environmentalism run amok, if you will. There was lumber mills,
yeah,
right? And a lot of these towns throughout northern Arizona were stood up around lumber mills. It's a very economically viable solution. States like Oregon, who own most of their land. If you look at Oregon, the federal government doesn't have a huge presence in Oregon. They have an amazingly well-run and permitted state lumber industry, where private industry can come in and bid on vast amounts of forest, and they go in with a very set amount of rules, how many trees they can take per acre and what they can do and what types of trees they can take. And it's profitable. Big lumber companies are actually harvesting in Oregon for profit, and we could do that in Arizona too. We need control of our land, and we just need to grin and bear it.
So when it comes time to fighting these fires, what are the best practices? And what are you said earlier, we're not doing it the way we used to or as effectively. Is it more planes in the fleet? Is it, if we're not going to thin the forest, what's the best way to try to eliminate this damage?
If you're not going to thin the forest, in my opinion, and in a lot of professionals' opinions, you got to do everything you can to stop the fire, because the fire will burn so hot that it will destroy everything there is. Top growth, undergrowth, devastates the forest. Yeah, more assets. You need more aircraft. It's great to have more ground crews. It's great that we have inmates out fighting fires now. I think that's a great use of their time. The real answer is a combination, though. Fight the fire, thin the forest, develop the resources, and you know, you won't have these massive rodeo Chudeskai type fires that we've seen in the past.
And what we just saw in Prescott, you know, 4th of July weekend, here it was, the rodeo in Prescott. We saw this, the fire that was just up there now, and it's just so reminiscent of what happened a few years ago. We're just fortunate there's not more loss of life, because when those crews get into the fire, if it changes directions and the spotters aren't in place, it's devastating.
We are, yeah. And you know, the more and more cabins are getting built every day. Obviously, our population's growing. Arizona's a great state to live in. Mm-hmm. We're only going to see more devastation as these fires get bigger and bigger and people live closer and closer to them.
You know, I appreciate you coming on the show. I love to have people on from the state of Arizona, like in our legislature. We goof on the legislature a lot on the radio, but the fact of the matter is, what an interesting career you have, and then to serve so many years in the Guard as a pilot and serve your country, and then serve in the legislature, because it can't be easy. It's got to be like herding cats down there. So I appreciate the time. Travis Grantham is someone that I've gotten to know a little bit, and he's serving in your state legislature. He has a business here in the state of Arizona, born and raised here, and he's also an officer in the Army Air National Guard. And I appreciate everything you're doing, and your advice and expertise in this area is great. I wish they called on you more.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks for being here.
Yep.
We'll be back. Welcome back. It's time for one of my favorite parts of the show. We call it From Arizona for America. It's our way to congratulate and thank the fine Arizona men and women who have recently graduated from boot camp and are now serving in our country's military. So please join me in honoring Airman First Class Joey Nunez from Peoria High School in Peoria, Airman Michael Shepard from Mojave High School in Bullhead City, and Airman Alexis Hernandez from Westview High School in Phoenix. For a list of more of our friends and neighbors that are from Arizona for America, you can go to the Mike Broomhead page at aztv.com. We'll be back in a minute with Broomhead's Best and hashtag this. Don't go away. Now it's time for the part of the show we call Broomhead's Best. This week, it's a man named Nolan Gorman. This young man is from Sandra Day O'Connor High School right here in the state of Arizona, at the national or at the All-Star game for Major League Baseball, he wins the home run derby. Congratulations to this young man. He absolutely deserves to be Broomhead's best. And while we're talking about that game, congratulations to Goldie, Jake Lamb, Zach Greinke, and Robbie Ray, the 4 representatives from the Arizona Diamondbacks, to make it to the All-Star game. And now it's time for #this. I can't believe I'm going to say this phrase. #Kid Rock for Senate. Kid Rock has made a statement that he is going to run for the Senate for the state of Michigan. I'm telling you, he's going to win. If Al Franken can do it from Minnesota, Kid Rock can do it in Michigan. Now, believe it or not, he is a very fiscally conservative Republican, and he says on fiscal issues, he is more of a, I'm going to paraphrase, I think he's more libertarian. He is more of, he has strong-held beliefs, but doesn't believe it's much of the government's business. He's middle of the road on social issues, but strong on the military. I think he's going to be in the Senate. It's surprising to say, and I'm anxious to see what he's like in that setting. So that this week is your Broomhead's Best and #this. We'll be back here in just a moment to close out the show and talk about next week's guest. I want to thank Travis Grantham for being on the show. Earlier in the sweep, I talked about the city of Phoenix. Now, we're the 5th largest city in the country. I broadcast this show from Phoenix, Arizona. And I've got to tell you what's disturbing is we have a hotel that's owned and built by the city of Phoenix. It loses money every year. They're going to sell it at a loss to the taxpayers of possibly $100 million. On top of that, they own a bunch of golf courses that, guess what? Lose money. How do you lose money in Arizona on a golf course and a hotel? The only thing that this city is not losing money on is a bar, and that's because they don't own one. If they did, they'd lose money there too. So it's time for them to sell these assets, let the private sector run these industries, and stop pouring taxpayer money into these things. It's a horrible idea. Next week on the show, we are going to have Ken Crane, who is the president of the Phoenix Law Enforcement Association, to talk about the possible changes to the policy of immigration enforcement in Phoenix. Not necessarily a good idea. So we're going to talk with him next week. Thanks for being with the show this week. Have a great week, everyone. We'll see you next Saturday. God bless.
Get more of Mike Broomhead on Facebook, Twitter, and of course weekday mornings from 6 to 10 on News Talk 550 KFYI.